Lovely to see everyone. This is our annual events week. There's not been one in person for a couple of years, so for lots of us, it is our first in-person events week. But it's great to see everybody. The theme for the week is purpose. As you can see on the screen, we've got loads of talks, lunchtimes and evenings throughout the week. And this evening's talk is called Identifying My Purpose, What Makes My Life Worthwhile. So, yeah.
We really hope you've enjoyed the food so far. Hasn't it been amazing? Tonight, just a bit of a feel of what this evening is going to look like. We're going to start with an interview with a student, just talking about how he has, the ways he has found to make his life worthwhile. Then we will be inviting our speaker tonight. During the talk, there'll be several periods for discussion amongst your tables. So just to facilitate that, if there's anyone you don't know yet on your table, maybe just go around and introduce yourselves for a couple minutes.
We're going to start, as we said, with an interview between me and Aubrey. Neither of us have ever done an interview in our lives before, so we're totally winging this, so please excuse any stutters. But yeah, Aubrey, do you want to just introduce yourself, what you study, what year you're in, maybe where you grew up, that kind of thing?
Sure. Hi guys, I am Aubrey. I'm a first year studying mechanical engineering. I was born in Zimbabwe and I've come here for university.
Nice, thank you. It's okay, well, just talk loudly. That's good. Okay, so this evening we're looking at what makes your life worthwhile. If I were to randomly come up to you on the street and ask you that question, what would your answer be, yes or no?
For a long time it wasn't. I felt in my personal statement I made it sound like I actually knew what I was doing with my life, but I really don't. I should use the mic, sorry. Yeah, okay. I felt like I was on this continuous pursuit of trying to find a meaning or purpose, trying to find peace. I was living life like it was a means to an end. Having a degree so I could get the dream job, and only then could I finally live life to the full. So just last year in December, I actually decided to give my whole heart to Jesus. And I just felt like since then, I'm not looking for peace, I'm living in it. And ever since, I've just felt more alive. You know, it says in John chapter 10, verse 10, the thief comes to kill and destroy, but I have come so that they may have life and they may have it to the full. I just feel so alive, you know, just after I finally gave my heart to Jesus in full, so, yeah.
Amazing. So, did you grow up in a Christian home? Has Jesus always been kind of part of your ideologies or not?
Yes, I grew up in a Christian home, a Christian my whole life, but I just hadn't really given him everything yet. I was just really afraid to, and this December is when it all changed for me, I'd say.
Okay,
yeah.
Amazing. So, do you think if you were to look back on your life, if we jump ahead, this is a little bit depressing, but if we jump ahead to the end of your life and look back on your life, what would you say, knowing and living for Jesus, what difference would that have made? And how does that make your life worthwhile in reality?
I guess it wouldn't really be a question of whether my whole life was worthwhile for its true meaning. I think when you live with Jesus, every day is worthwhile. And I finally gotten to that point in my life when it's no longer something I'm looking to attain, but something I'm living and breathing right now.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. If anybody wants to talk to Aubrey afterwards, I'm sure he'd be very happy to do that. Nice guy to talk to. I would recommend. Grab a chat.
Thank you.
We now have the pleasure of inviting our speaker tonight up to the stage. This is Pete Dre. He works for the family of Christian unions across the country. And if I may, I'm going to start with a question for Pete. Pete, you grew up along the South Coast.
I did.
So what is the best city? What is the best city on the South Coast?
The best city on the South Coast, clearly. What? Don't say Portsmouth. I won't say Portsmouth. I was actually told, do not say Portsmouth. So I once did one of these events in Newcastle. I made a joke about Newcastle United. I might as well not have come for the evening. So I have learnt. No, I'm from Bournemouth, so just a bit up the coast from here. definitely the best town on the South Coast, yeah.
Okay, we'll leave you to it.
Oh, great. Wow. Do you know what? I thought I was going to be grilled on that a little bit and might need to prove my point. But, you know, if the whole of this evening is making that point as easily as that, then we're in for happy times, aren't we? We are thinking about this question tonight. Well done for coming out on a Monday night to answer just a little question, isn't it? Which is, what's life all about? What makes life worthwhile? We're thinking about these questions of purpose this evening. Let me start by telling you about a man named Jim Watson. There he is. You might know who Jim Watson is. He's a famous geneticist. Back in 1953, along with a man called Francis Crick, he was the first person to propose the double helix structure of DNA. He's now in his 90s, but he's only recently retired. Now, I've got to tell you that plenty of eminent scientists will tell you that human life does have an overarching structure. Jim Watson is not amongst their number. When he was asked about human purpose, he said this: I don't think we're for anything. We're just products of evolution, and you may say, your life must be pretty bleak if you don't think there's a purpose, but hey, I'm anticipating a good lunch. Now, I think that actually gets quite close to how many of us would think about human purpose today. We may say, no, there may not be any big, overarching purpose to human life. There's no ultimate reason to get out of bed in the morning, no real significance to it all. Oh, but my life is full of mini purposes, and I look forward to them. So I'm looking forward to lunch, or there's the match to look forward to, or we're going to see that film, or my sister's coming up at the weekend, or we've got that night out, can't wait. We fill our lives with a merry-go-round of little purposes, just enough to get us out of bed that day. I've got to say, most of the time, that works. Whilst life is good, that works. Whilst there's a lunch to look forward to, and there are friends to see and things to do and holidays to go on, and the degree isn't, too oppressive, and whilst our bodily health is okay, these mini purposes feel like they're enough. I think it's easy to be bright and breezy about our lack of ultimate purpose when life is good. But when we fail the exam, or our friends give up on us, or family life is hard, or we're in the middle of a global pandemic, that lack of big purpose feels like it's already kicking us, I think, when we're already down. Now, Jim Watson tells us, and our culture tells us for the most part, that we're not for anything, that the idea of an ultimate human purpose is a mirage, a convenient fiction. And yet look at our lives, because it shows that, fascinatingly, we can't live without purpose. And we can't live as if our lives aren't part of an unfolding story. We can't help but keep asking, what am I for? And that's why I think there are two main things we look to make our lives purposeful: relationships and achievements. When it comes to relationships, it's as if we turn to each other and we say, will you be the one that gives my life purpose? I know it's Valentine's Day this evening, but I'm not necessarily talking about romantic relationships here. Often as people start families, they look to their children and they say, you are the reason I get out of bed. You are my reason for living. The other thing we can do is we can look to our achievements. That might be to our degrees or to our careers or to sport. And we say, they are my reason for living. They are my reason for getting out of bed in the morning. Or we say it's the experience, it's the fun that we have along the way. And so we give ourselves to traveling or to nights out. But here is the premise of tonight's event. Here is the premise, in fact, of this entire set of events this week, that none of the things that we look to in order to make our lives purposeful ultimately cut it. When we ask little things to make our life purposeful, to give us a reason for being on the planet, for getting out of bed in the morning, we're asking more of them than they can deliver. And so, therefore, we're setting ourselves up for a life of continual disappointment. When it comes to relationships, for example, if you ask a boyfriend or a girlfriend to be the reason that you are on the planet, then they better give you the relationship that you want. Makes the stakes very high. When we say to another person, will you be the one who makes my life significant, then we can become very demanding of them. If they have problems, if they're ill, there's a time of sadness, such that they can't fulfill my expectations of the relationship, I probably won't deal with it very well. They were supposed to be the reason I was getting out of bed in the morning, not to add to my list of problems. When we ask any relationship to give us a sense of purpose, we're asking more of human beings than they can provide of us. And relationships invariably collapse under this sheer weight that we put upon them. In a group this size, some of us will have come from families where as a child, we were made to feel as though we were the reason that our parents were on the planet. And you probably know how ugly that is, because such parents try to live their life through their children. Become suffocating, very pushy parents. And not surprisingly, as children begin to leave home, these people struggle, because it's not just their children that have left home, but their sense of purpose has walked out the door as well. Similarly, if we give ourselves to achievements to give us our sense of significance, there's a very good chance that our very achievements will destroy us. After all, if I'm giving myself to achieve, to succeed, I will put in the hours, I will sacrifice pretty much anything and anyone in order to get what I want. And then when things don't go well, when I don't end up on top, I find myself asking, what is my life for? Or maybe I do achieve exactly what I set my heart upon, and I get there and it turns out to not be all that it was cracked up to be. And I can't help but reflect that I have lost so much along the way in order to get there. A few years ago, I remember reading an interview with a Premier League footballer. He'd been at the top of his game for years. He'd won a hatful of trophies, but now he was injured long term. Interestingly, the person who was interviewing him was another footballer who was also injured. And he asked this question: do you ever feel that on a Saturday afternoon, I think, I'm a footballer and I'm not playing, so what am I? I'm a bit purposeless. And this is always the danger. If we find our reason for living in the things that we do, then what happens when, for whatever reason, we're not able to do that thing? Make football the basis of your identity, and times of pain and injury make you feel purposeless. But so will all of the other non-football-y bits of life as well, won't they? Relationships, doing the dishes, writing essays, all the rest. They feel purposeless. And we feel there's got to be more to human purpose than that. We're going to split into groups around our tables a number of times. All this is going to do, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to discuss these questions. It's going to feel woefully short. But in some ways, this might tee up the discussion from later on. A couple of questions here. In 4 or 5 minutes' time, I'll be back up. Have a go at these questions together around your tables. Plenty of time to keep talking about that as the evening goes on. So we've thought about relationships, we've thought about achievements. I want to suggest that we need to think about human purpose on a wholly different footing. To find true human purpose, we need to look not to relationships or achievements, but actually to a lifelong stretching quest. And this is a quest in which we'll make friends along the way and we'll achieve things along the way, and yet the quest itself is bigger than mere relationships or mere achievements. One of my favorite writers put it like this. He said, to be human is to be on the move, pursuing something, after something. Humans are existential sharks. We have to move to live. I want to suggest that it's on the move that we find true purpose. And I want to suggest furthermore that it's only in following Jesus that we're able to find a big enough, all-embracing enough quest, a big enough summons to cause us to get up and go, that we'll find true purpose and life. In front of you, you'll find a copy of this book. This is a copy of the Gospel of Mark. It's the earliest biography of Jesus, which we find in the Bible. And at its heart, we read of Jesus' call, which millions of people around the world and across cultures and throughout time has believed gives them true purpose. So I'd love you to turn to Mark chapter 8 on page 42. We're going to read a little bit of this extraordinary claim. Page 42. You might just need to move so that you can see a copy. Great. Page 42, and we're going to read from verse 34, just under the little section which is called the way of the cross. Here's verse 34. Jesus says, or then it says, then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. The story goes that in 1900, Ernest Shackleton, the polar explorer, took out this advert. It said, men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Now, once we get beyond the gendered language here, I think this advert says two things to us. It speaks to two parts of us. On the one hand, it speaks to our desire for comfort, which makes us think that anybody going with Shackleton is totally unhinged. But on the other hand, don't you find it also speaking to something else within you? Actually, a desire for adventure, for a bigger purpose, for a quest that will chase out the boring bits in life, which I think is something that we all want. Now, it turns out that Shackleton's famous advert is an urban myth. It was never even printed, but it's not very different from the call that Jesus really did make in verse 34. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Jesus is speaking to people like us, people tempted by comfort, people like Jim Watson, who may say, look, whilst there's no really big purpose to life, we're anticipating a good lunch. And it's as if Jesus is coming to us, Shackleton-like, and is shaking us and saying, come with me because we're going on an adventure. And you need to know this adventure will be tough. In fact, along the way, you might be killed. But on an adventure with me, you will truly find life, purpose. And so whilst this way of living promises the purpose that we crave, it's certainly not comfortable, is it? Look at the three things that Jesus says embarking on this adventure will involve. First, he says we must deny ourselves. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves. Now, studying as we all are in a post-Christian country, when we hear this, we think that Jesus is asking us to deny things to ourselves. A bit like denying ourselves chocolate during Lent, or denying ourselves sex outside of marriage. And this is what causes some people to believe that Jesus is life diminishing. He's just calling us to an eternal life of boring moderation. But I want you to notice that Jesus' call is much bigger than that. He's not saying that you have to deny yourself things. He's saying you have to deny your very self. According to Jesus, our problem isn't that we have too many things. Our problem is that we take everything that we have, our bodies, our brains, chocolate, sex, money, everything else, and we relate to them all through the lens of self. Now, as the week progresses, we're going to see that this is the very reason that Jesus says the world is in such a mess. I actually saw some of us at lunchtime that this is part of the reason that actually environmentally the world is in such a mess, because we keep saying yes to self. Self says, I want it my own way. Self says, I want to do what I want to do. Self says, on Valentine's Day, I want that special person to build their life around me. Self says, I want people to notice me. I want people to adore me. I want what I want. Now, we're going to think more about this diagnosis of the world that Jesus brings on Wednesday night. But just for the moment, will you see that if each of us is saying yes to self in this way, it is brutal. Not only do we see that we live in a planet which is being eroded of its natural resources at record speed, but we inflict deep wounds upon ourselves and other people. See, according to Jesus, saying yes to self in this way has contributed to the deep pain that each of us feels. Saying yes to self not only leads to unjust trade regimes and despotic politicians, but also to a shallow insta-culture where we're crying out to be noticed, but we don't even notice the needs of others right before us. Now, Jesus says, come after me on an adventure with me and say no to self. Self is no longer to be in charge of your life. I am to be in charge of your life. See, most of us think, my life in my hands. Christianity is my life in Jesus' hands. Because only there can I find true purpose. Here's an application of this. You may have written Christianity off to this point because of something quite trivial. You don't fancy church on Sundays. I want you to just notice Jesus is not saying, I want your Sundays. He's saying, I want everything. I want the lot. If you want to come after me, you have to give me your life. And it's reinforced in what he says next. You must take up your cross. See, in Jesus' day, the only reason you would take up your cross is if you were going to be crucified. Crucifixion was the most shameful of deaths, reserved for the worst enemies of the state. And Jesus is saying, coming after me won't be safe. You might even find that you make some enemies. And it's crystallized in the third phrase. Do you see it there? Follow me. Wherever I go, you must go too. So if you read on in this gospel, you'll see Jesus going to a whole range of places. You'll see him going to some very nice middle-class dinner parties. You'll see him speaking to the religious establishment. More often, you'll find him at the social periphery. You'll find him eating and befriending prostitutes and lepers, the shamed and the shameful. And Jesus is saying, following me means going to those places, befriending such as these. That might seem daunting enough, mightn't it? But Jesus' call goes even further still, because where did this manner of walking take Jesus? Well, it took him to being misunderstood, to being betrayed, to being mistreated, to being killed. And because Jesus' quest involves going wherever he goes, there is an implicit warning, follow me and it will be costly. Some of you are thinking, goodness, I thought this was about an evening encouraging me to think about following Jesus. Why would anybody bother if it's going to be so demanding? But let's remember what we've been saying. You can only know a satisfying enough life purpose when you are living for something all-embracing and which won't let you down. It's got to be bigger than just relationships or commitments. It's only when we find a cause much bigger than ourselves that we can find real life. And here Jesus is speaking as God in the flesh, and that is what he is calling us to. See, this means that Jesus' cause is not just one of any other causes that you could go for. Yes, there are many big causes you could give your life to. But speaking as God, Jesus is saying, only mine will ultimately bring you purpose and life. Look at what Jesus promises next. Verse 35, he says this, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it." See, giving your life to any cause at all presents you with a choice. You can either risk it all by setting out, or you can stay at home in comfort and keep what you have. Here's one of my favorite philosophers, Bilbo Baggins. He put it like this: "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step out onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." And now the call from Jesus comes in the same form. There is a cost to be faced. Denying yourself and taking up your cross is no picnic. Actually, in effect, Jesus is saying, will you come and die with me? The crux of the dilemma his question poses to us then is it worth it? Is it worth it? Turns out that some quests are worth embarking upon, even though they mean leaving lots behind. Frodo sacrifices everything, doesn't he? Because he thinks Middle-earth is worth it. And you and I will embark upon quests and adventures if we think that the rewards are good enough, even if it means leaving lots behind. The film 127 Hours tells the unforgettable story of this man. He's called Aaron Ralston. He was a climber who got hopelessly trapped in a Utah canyon back in 2003. And after 3 days of minimal food and water, during which he eventually had to turn to drinking his own urine, Aaron Ralston cut off his right arm in order to escape. And we might say, what would drive anybody to such drastic action? Well, here's the answer. Though he was unmarried at the time, Aaron dared to imagine a future in which he had a wife and children. He said, that is a cause that is quite literally worth losing my right arm for. When we see the scale of Jesus' call, we might be tempted to say, forget it. I'm staying at home. I'm never going to set out. I'm not going to embark on a journey like yours. If I'm going to give myself to a quest, Jesus, it will be less demanding than yours. Maybe I'll find purpose there. We think we're saving our lives through ducking Jesus' call. Jesus addresses us as living God, and he says, no, to walk away from me is to surrender your human purpose and ultimately to lose life. Because you'll never know what you were made for. Not really. So may I be provocative in saying there may be danger in following Jesus, but there is greater peril still in staying at home. Here's another thing for you to discuss for 4 minutes. How do you respond to the idea that there's greater peril in staying at home than in following Jesus? Go for that for 4 minutes. Really sorry to interrupt you. Was that a groan? Oh, how is he interrupting our conversation? The night is young. All right, here's where we got to so far then. I've been suggesting that all of our mini purposes, I'll come back to them in a minute, I hate fish. In the end, all of our mini purposes, where they're built around relationships or achievements, they will inevitably disappoint us. Everything within us yearns for something more, something bigger than even a first or a night out or being well thought of by our family or even getting a Nobel Prize. And so remember our opening questions. What makes my life purposeful? What's my life for? Jesus' answer is, and he's speaking as the living God, human lives are for the God who made them. And here's where the fish come. We need a relationship with him like fish need water. A thing can only have life in the environment it was created for. Without God, the The life that we've got is a bit like fish out of water. It's like we're thrashing around. We've not got the life that we were made for. And it's that which makes us vulnerable to being crushed by life's disappointments and dissatisfied even in its sweetest pleasures. Listen, it's our self-focused turn away from God that leaves us perennially unsatisfied. And that's because we weren't made for self, we were made for Him. It's only in Him that we can know a true life of purpose, both now and eternally. Which means that the biggest need that any of us has is to be brought back into relationship with Him. Yet that is easier said than done, because our addiction to self means that any attempt to try and get back to God by ourselves is a non-starter. Our obsession, our addiction to self runs just too deep. We can't get back to God by ourselves. Living for God has caused us to trash His planet and wound other people, but it's also caused us to burn our bridges with Him as well. We can't just walk back into friendship with Him. And yet that's why Jesus came in the person of God the Son. Jesus came, as it were, to put us back into the river, to restore us to the life and to the relationship of purpose that we were made for. In fact, Jesus' appeal comes at an important part in Mark's gospel. It's a turning point, actually, because from this point onward, Jesus will resolutely journey toward Jerusalem, where He knows that He will be rejected and where He will suffer and where He will die. And yet there He walks with purpose. Why? Listen, when we turn to self, we always turn away from the living God, the source of life. And without Him, human life is just a pale shadow of what life was created to be, that it was designed for. And unless we are turned back to Him, we face the ultimate death of permanent separation away from Him. And yet to Jerusalem Jesus goes, because in obedience to His Father and out of love for us, Jesus pours out His life on the cross. He dies our death in our place. And through doing so, He wins us back from our self-inflicted path to destruction. As He rises on the third day, He shows not even death can stop Him from putting people who trust Him right with God. What does this mean for the future? It means that one day, when Jesus returns, His people will know human life in the quality and quantity it was made for. And yet, living a life of true purpose can start today as we relate to Him, the God that we were made to know. So what is human purpose according to Jesus? It's this: secure in the love of God for you just as you are. Human purpose means dying to self, carrying your cross, and following Jesus. Knowing that He loves you, that He's secured your forgiveness, you're launched into a life of learning to love the things that He loves and to hate the things that He hates and to treat other people with the same kind of love with which He's shown you. Listen, all of us are different, and so exactly what this life of purpose looks like will be different from person to person. You have your abilities, your passions, your talents. They're unique to you. I have mine. It's as if we're all a different prism, and the same light of living for Jesus is, as it shone through, will cause a different array. But our common purpose as humans is to be loved by Him and together to mirror Him to each other and to the world in every detail, waiting for Jesus to return. I would love you to ask the Christian on your table what their experience of living with His sort of purpose looks like. For me, life now with Jesus is a bit like going on a journey with Him. It's a stretching journey because remember, Jesus wants every second of our existence. It's a safe journey because we know that what qualifies us to walk with Jesus is not our own ability, but what he's already done through his death on the cross. It's a satisfying journey because no step along the way is wasted. Every moment is an opportunity to get to know the living God better. And because we're headed to a destination which is glorious. You and I are never simply left waiting for lunch. One of my favorite, lesser-known Disney movies is called The Straight Story. The brilliant, brilliant movie. It's based on the real-life account of Alvin Straight, who's an elderly disabled man who learns that his brother, with whom he fell out decades earlier, his brother Lyle, has had a stroke. And Alvin longs to be reconciled to his brother Lyle before he dies, but he's unable to drive a car, so he hatches a plan. He will drive his lawnmower to his brother. This is true, and he ends up driving all the way across Iowa and Wisconsin. As the film unfolds, you see Alvin's life threatened in the most hilarious of ways, actually. A truck at one point comes a bit too close to him and allows him little space. And then this isn't funny, his gears fail. His brakes fail as he goes down a hill. Eventually, his gearbox blows up and the lawnmower dies just a few miles away from Lyle's house. And so when Alvin finally makes it to Lyle's house, his lawnmower is being towed by a tractor. And then you come to just this most poignant part of the film because Lyle, his brother who's had a stroke, comes out of the house. And the music drops. And you see Lyle looking down at Alvin's lawnmower. And he says, I won't do the accent, "Did you ride this thing all this way just to see me?" And Alvin simply responds, and these are the last words of the film, "I did, Lyle. I did, Lyle." And then the movie closes, and these two elderly brothers who've been at war, now reconciled, sit together outside Lyle's house in silence. And we know the journey has been dangerous, but the journey has been worth it. Knowing that we are on the road with Jesus that leads to life with God can keep us going even when things are tough. Because we have a destination, we have a traveling companion, and we have a purpose. Listen, follow Jesus, and it might be hard. Some of you are from countries where it might be very hard to follow Jesus. Every long journey ultimately becomes uncomfortable, yet Jesus loves you, and he promises that where we're going with him is worth it. That he is with us along the way, and that the destination makes every twist and turn that gets us there worth it too. Parts of life that once felt pointless are now rendered meaningful, because even in the most boring moment of life, you can be getting to know the God who made you better. Suffering is still painful, but with Jesus as your companion, even suffering and death don't have the final say. Jim Watson says, "I don't think we're for anything. Jesus says, 'Give me everything, follow me, however hard it is, and I will give you the life and purpose you were made for.'" Let me ask you, which of those sentences is easier to hear? But which of them resonates better with your experience of being human? Friends, this week, the living God is offering you the life of purpose that you were made for. It's life that will spill out into your achievements and relationships, but which is bigger than your achievements and relationships. It's life which redeems even the most boring moments. You can come to know him better. It's a life with purpose, and it's a life which begins now, but which cannot be robbed by death. Back into our discussion groups one last time. Have a go at these questions, responding to Jim Watson's statement, and also to think what questions you might have to ask this week if you're to come to a proper investigation of Jesus. Back into table groups, 4 minutes, one last time. There's going to be plenty of time to keep those discussions going. I'm really sorry to have to keep. I feel like my younger brother actually. He kept interrupting me growing up. I'm sorry about that. Listen, I don't know how you are responding to all that you've heard this evening. I'm pretty aware that we've made some big claims this evening. And you may be pretty skeptical about all that's been said tonight. Let me say, this week is for asking questions. It's for putting your objections out there. It's for putting your honest questions on the table. So keep coming, if you will. You might also like to take one of the books that are over there. This one is called Making Sense of Life. It goes through a whole number of different questions that we can ask about our experience of humanity and grapples with some answers together. That may address some of your hang-ups. Feel free at the end to keep chatting around your tables. Ply the Christians on your table with your hardest questions. I'm happy to have a bash at some of them as well, if you'd like. So that might be you. Perhaps you've heard about what has been said tonight, and you've thought, do you know what? Weird as it seems to say, given the content of what Jesus has to say, part of me hopes that this is true tonight. Part of me hopes that Jesus is this God who's inviting me into a life of purpose. And you're coming to see that if you were coming to know him, it would be life-changing. It wouldn't just mean bolting him onto your Sunday. It would mean completely orienting your life around. And you've realized that you need to look into this some more. My guess is actually that may be the majority of people in this room. In a minute, there's going to be an opportunity for you to fill out one of the little cards on the tables and to just say, I'd like to know more. There's going to be a course happening next week. You can discuss around tables. Feel free just to write the word more on the comment box if you would like to. Or you can say to your Christian friend, I want to know more. And we'll get back to you, and we want to help you to dignify your questions and to help you in a way that's suitable for you. But I wonder, I can't see into anybody's heart, but I wonder, I know some of you here have been thinking about this for a little while. And you are thinking this evening, I don't know everything about Jesus, but I do know enough. I can see that if I'm to have a purpose which embraces every aspect of my life, it needs to be God-sized. And I've come to see that Jesus is the living God. And that's a bit terrifying. But you've come to see that if you want life with God, you need Jesus. You're glad that he came for you. And tonight you've come to realize that actually it's riskier to walk away from Jesus than it is to follow him. Now, what I'm going to do in a moment, and we're going to do this every evening, is that I'm going to pray. And if in the quiet of your heart you would like to say to God, I want a restored relationship with you, this is how it begins. It's how any relationship begins, actually, by talking. And so as I pray, you don't have to say anything out loud, but just in the quiet of your heart, you might want to echo along to what I'm saying. I recognize that for many people in this room, probably most people in this room, you're not ready to take this step yet. That's fine. Don't feel as though you're being press-ganged into anything. You might like to just listen to the words of the prayer, or you might like to think about other things. It's a free world. You can do what you want. But let's all respect those who want to commit themselves into the hands of Jesus now. So what I'm going to suggest is we just all close our eyes to respect those who want to take this step. If you want to begin a relationship with the living God, just pray this along in the quiet of your heart. We're going to say sorry, thank you, and please. Living God, sorry. Sorry that I've lived without you in your world. I recognize that in living for smaller purposes, I've treated you and others very badly. Thank you. Thank you that knowing every detail of my life, in love, you were willing to send Jesus for me. Thank you that you love me enough to pay for my everlasting welcome. Please forgive me. Send me your Holy Spirit that I might know the reality of your love for me, and so that I might live for you. Amen. Listen, there's nothing magical about those words. But actually, if you prayed that from deep within your heart, and that was an honest prayer, God turns away no one. The living God turns away no one who approaches him in this way. But you will need some help just as you start living for Jesus. And so if you prayed along with me, again in a moment as we fill out the cards, can you just indicate that somehow? You might want to write, I prayed with Pete, or something along those lines, which help us to know that you've taken this step. Actually, even writing that down might nail the decision that you've made tonight to the master of your heart. Help you to realize this really is a genuine thing that you're doing. And let me suggest that you actually just tell someone about that tonight. It might be someone on your table, might be the friend that bought you, it could be me if you like as well. Listen, thanks so much for listening so well. I look forward to tomorrow, where we're going to think about purpose from a different angle. We're particularly going to think about pain tomorrow. We're going to investigate more of what it means to live a life for Jesus. Back over to Miriam and to Pete.
Thank you, Pete. As Pete indicated at the end, we're now just going to spend a couple minutes filling in those forms, those connect cards on the table. That's just a chance for sort of two things. This is sort of the first event like this we've run since COVID, so we'd really appreciate some feedback on that. And it's also a chance to connect with you more. And if you responded to Pete's prayer, obviously you can indicate that as well. We'd really love if everybody could fill out one of those forms, even if you're already a member of the CU or anything. So we're just going to spend a couple minutes doing that now.
Yeah. While we're here, the microphone is on. Pete mentioned briefly that there is a course starting next week. That's called Purpose Explored, and it's basically a continuation of Events Week. So it's going to be every Thursday evening at 7:30 in the Faith and Reflection Centre. So if you're interested, again, put that on your form if you fancy learning more about that, or grab somebody to speak to and they'll be able to give you a bit more information. We also have some uncover marks on your table, which are free. So please do grab one and take it away with you. This is, again, kind of one of the accounts of Jesus' life written by somebody who knew him. So grab that, have a look at it. There's questions to help you work through it. Maybe ask the person that brought you along, or ask somebody that you know is a Christian to go through that with you. I'm sure they'd love to do that. And that can be a really helpful way to learn a little bit more about what we looked at this evening. And we also have events for the rest of the week. As we know, we'll be here again, same place, same time tomorrow evening, looking at the title, I've Lost My Purpose, How Can I Cope When Everything is Falling Apart? So if that's something you'd be interested in, please do come back. And this is technically the formal end, but we have loads and loads of cakes over there, tea and coffee. Please do stay around, grab something else to eat, sit down again, continue your chats. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. So, yeah, please do that. Thank you very much for coming. Nice to see everyone.